Chapter 23. Griffin Island had until the great flap of '84 been known as the Brentford 8, a picturesque parcel of land about 100 yards in length, standing about another 50 out from the Brentford shoreline of the River Thames. To its rear, the glorious gardens of Kew, and before it, the new art centre, which it faced with apparent lack of concern. Prior to the Hilarion War, it had supported one of the last great boatyards nearabouts, but now the dry dock was choked with weeds beneath the iron skeleton of the old glass roof. It was very much a wildlife sanctuary, given over to nesting herons, cormorants and black-necked geese. At the island's heart was a natural grove of 13 cedars, wherein, local legend held, certain rites were performed in the times of yore by wizards of the day. Now it was the haven of courting couples who, armed with Wellington boots and a tide table, performed their own tantric rituals with one eye open to the rising Thames. At 11:30 upon this particular evening, a tiny coracle, built in a traditional manner from willow and hide, and one of several that Omally maintained at well-hidden moorings, slipped out silently from a dilapidated quayside and drifted downstream upon the night-time river. Pooley steered the circular craft with the single oar, and John sat before, gazing out into the darkness. Ahead, at the western tip of the island, the glass and chromium tower rose from the foreshore to lose itself in darkness. Above, the stars came and went at irregular intervals as airships drifted to and fro about their extraordinary business. The dull hum of their engines had an almost somnambulant quality, and the light mist, hovering upon the water, added a final touch to what seemed a dream landscape. The beauty and feeling of it was not lost upon the two boatmen. "There is a little bay upon the north shore," Omally whispered. "We'll beach there." Pooley swivelled the oar, and the current bore the tiny craft onward without effort. They had not as yet formed a definitive plan of campaign. So far, they were down to watching and listening, and only to actually intervening should things look as if they were actually getting out of control. As to exactly what form their intervention might take, or what exactly might constitute out of control, these were matters as yet undecided upon. The craft beached soundlessly, and Omally drew it up beyond the tide mark, turned it over, and secured it to a tree. On furtive feet, the two men slipped into the undergrowth, moving towards the grove. If ceremonies were to be performed, it seemed to them likely that it was there they would be done. Ahead, through the darkness, Pooley espied a flicker of firelight. He placed his hand upon O'Malley's arm and pointed. With a sobriety which was unnatural to them, the two crept nearer until they reached a suitable vantage point. 5 figures could clearly be seen, seated in a ring about a small fire of driftwood. In their duffel coats, it was impossible to discern the sexes of the campfire sitters, but earlier observation suggested that they were the same 5 as seen in the Swan, 2 young men and 3 women, each in their late teens or early 20s. Omally uncorked his hip flask and pressed it to his lips. He took a slug. "Seems harmless enough so far," he whispered. "A bit of a gincan coolie." Jim accepted the proffered flask and drew upon it. "If the sausages and sticks come out, then I suggest we join them." In the distance, the memorial library clock did its duty and struck the midnight hour. As its last chime faded into silence, the 5 figures climbed slowly to their feet and removed their duffel coats. The skulking duo pressed their faces forward in rapt attention. As the duffel coats dropped to the ground, it was revealed that all 5 wore nothing whatever beneath. They were stark naked. "Would you look at that?" said John Omally. "Just try and stop me." The celebrants now kicked off their Wellington boots, linked hands, and began a slow, clockwise perambulation about the fire, chanting softly. "This has definitely got the edge on the Boy Scouts," said Jim in a hushed voice. "I wonder how you'd join." The vigour of the dance increased. The chanting became more audible. Words reached the two voyeurs, words they neither knew nor understood. Shadayel, Chayararita, Adonai, Tetragrammaton, Shadayel, Chayararita, Adonai, Tetragrammaton. The words had a hypnotic quality, and Pooley soon found his head bobbing to the rhythm as the naked bodies cavorted in the glow of the twinkling firelight. It was as if he had flown back through the ages and was witnessing some ancient fertility rite at a time when the earth was young and men and the elements were nothing but a single body. Omally, however, was made of sterner stuff. "This may not be too clever," he croaked into Pooley's mobile ear. "Shh," said Jim. "It's just a sing-along. Good clean fun." "It's witchcraft," said John. "Witchcraft." "Really?" Jim looked on with renewed interest. "Oh, geez, Jimmy. We will have to stop it." "Are you mad? You don't get this stuff on the telly." "We'll have to stop it, Jim." Omally rose to his feet. He made as if to cry out, but the words, whatever they might have been, never left his throat. With a sudden rush, something swept down from above. It was large, dark and ferocious, and it dropped directly into the fire with a great shriek, scattering the dancers to every side. As the two men looked on in horrified fascination, the thing drove down amidst the flames, extinguishing them. And now the light was uncertain, and the terror could only be glimpsed. Cries and screams rose in the darkness. Above them horrible roars as of some jungle beast. Great wings buffeted the air, and Omally saw a gigantic head, like an eagle's, though grossly magnified, rise and fall, driving its cruel beak amongst the writhing bodies that tumbled and fled before it. The thing was not altogether bird. It moved upon 4 feet, and a hellish barbed tail whipped and dived. Pooley and Omally, numb and speechless, fell back as a naked female plunged by them into the darkness beyond, crying and screaming. They saw a man lifted from his feet and wished to see no more. Turning tail they ran. The cove glowed silver-white in the moonlight. The naked woman was nowhere to be seen. In blind panic, knowing not what could or should be done, numb with fear and horror, they tore the coracle from its mooring, thrust it into the Thames, and roared away.